Welcome to Modern Anarchy, the podcast exploring sex, relationships, and liberation. I'm your host, Nicole.
I tried to keep her quiet, but she's screaming inside of me. I tried to keep her hiding, oh, shut up. I tried to keep her quiet, but she's a wild, wild woman.
On today's episode, we have Bear. Join us for a conversation about the journey to reclaiming our whole humanity. Together we talk about how everything we have learned about sex is wrong, the courage of vulnerability, and how feminism is about liberating all of us. Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to Modern Anarchy. I am so delighted to have all of you pleasure activists from around the world tuning in for another episode each Wednesday. My name is Nicole. I am a sex and relationship psychotherapist with training in psychedelic integration therapy, and I am also the founder of the Pleasure Practice, supporting individuals in crafting expansive sex lives and intimate relationships. Dear listener, I am so grateful to be sharing this conversation with you. Bear is so incredibly vulnerable and raw and authentic about their journey. And dear listener, you know that these sorts of conversations are what we need in the world. Authentic conversations about the mess, the joy, the pain, the pleasure of sexuality and relating, because we often just don't have the language to communicate about these things. And you know, I have talked so much about my big dream goals of my career, which is to end rape culture, right? And we end rape culture through conversations like this, through conversations in our community, and we develop more language and more safety in our nervous systems and with other people, and we then develop communication to step into our pleasures, into our desires, to make our fantasies realities. And that is how we end rape culture. One conversation at a time, one vulnerable story at a time. And I am so grateful to be sharing another one of those conversations with you today. All right, dear listener, if you are ready to liberate your pleasure, you can explore my offerings and resources at modernanarchypodcast.com, linked in the show notes below. And I want to say the biggest thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. You are supporting the long-term sustainability of the podcast, keeping this content free and accessible to all people. So thank you. If you want to join the Patreon community, get exclusive access into my research and personal exploration, and you can head on over to patreon.com/modernanarchypodcast, also linked in the show notes below. And with that, dear listener, please know that I am sending you all my love, and let's tune in to today's episode. Okay. So the first question that I ask each guest is, how would you introduce yourself to the listeners?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
A good one to start with. So I'm Bear Phillips. I am a dating, intimacy, and relationship coach. And I'm also a trauma-informed body worker. I'm really a sex worker. If I'm wanting to shock people, I'll just kind of come straight out with I'm a sex worker. But for me, that involves working with sexual trauma, primarily working with consent, working with communication, working with people to build safety in how they might be with me and then how they might be with others in the world at large. So that's the work I do. I used to be an architect, a designer for 30 years.
Wow.
Kind of gave that all up to do this work. Don't regret a single moment with it.
Yeah. I'm so excited to have you here and get to hold space for your story and your work and really dive in deep here.
Thank you.
Yeah. I know you mentioned that there's a very personal connection to this work, and Where
Mm.
would you want to start me and the listeners on that story?
Mm.
Where does it begin?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I forgot to mention in my initial intro that I've been writing a book. It's
Yeah.
called Feminism Will Make a Man Out of You. And it really charts my own journey and my own history, which starts way back, begins with CSA, with childhood sexual
Hmm.
abuse as a young
Yeah.
boy. And something that I grew up with then this understanding that men are perpetrators.
Mm,
That was my experience from a very young age. And then growing into manhood, having to make sense of, but wait, if I'm a man, what does that make me? And then finding myself going through a really interesting process, which also involves personal healing, therapy, different modalities of dance, movement, embodiment, kink. Kink was a really big part of the healing
sure.
journey. To really take apart everything that I thought I knew and understood around what masculinity is, what being a man is, in order to put it back together in a way that actually made sense to me, was aligned with my values, with who I am, and how I want to be in the world. So that's what the book's trying to speak to,
Mm,
kind of written to a 30-year-old me, a long time ago.
sure.
The book
Yeah.
that I wish I'd had, the support I wish I'd had at that time. There are
Hmm.
different ways of being a man and dealing with this issue of toxic masculinity, which is just so rife at the moment in so many spheres of life.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for opening up and trusting me and sharing that with all of the listeners, right? Your story, the personal connections, the roots to this work that
Mm,
you do.
thank you. Thank you for holding the
Mm,
space so beautifully.
yeah. I know this is a big question and hard to answer, but I'd be curious if there's anything you could say to your younger self, sitting where you're at with your current consciousness. I know the
Mm,
book is saying everything you'd want to say, but right
oh,
now in this conversation, yeah, is
mm,
there anything that you'd want to say to your younger self?
mm. I think I'd want to say it'll be okay.
Mm,
It'll be okay. Just as simple as that. I think that's where a lot of the research I've been doing and a lot of the thinking I've been doing around the nature of patriarchy and thinking of patriarchy as a trauma. It's the trauma we're all living with, but it's a particular trauma inflicted on boys and men.
mm-hmm.
And it's one of the reasons why so many men grow up with the sense of loneliness, isolation, why the suicide rate for men is
Yes.
3 times that as it is for women. And just recognizing and remembering just how lonely I felt for most of my life growing up. And just to like have a sense of, because there's that thing with men, an inability to reach out, an ability to ask for help when it's needed, a difficulty around asking for support, how challenging it can be to make connections, like real, intimate,
Mm-hmm.
authentic connections. That
Yeah.
that's such a common experience of this sense of loneliness and isolation. And I think I was very much feeling that in my 30s for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's so widespread. I think sometimes people don't even realize it. It's this normalized, oh, he's just a guy. That's how
Mhm.
men are.
Mhm.
That kills
Mhm.
me.
And we're taught that we need to project exactly the opposite of what we're actually feeling. That classic thing of being stoic and independent and having all the answers and not needing anything, not needing anyone. It's a little bit of that, the difference between the face we're putting onto the world and the reality of what we're feeling behind it. Because heaven
Mm-hmm.
knows vulnerability is a weakness to be avoided at
Right.
all costs. It's what
Right.
when it's the complete opposite.
And the pleasure that's on the other side of that too, when you can truly be vulnerable and present. Oh, wow. I mean, there's a
Hmm.
whole world that is being missed out on.
Mm. The pleasure is just the thing, really, on so many levels.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the reasons I do the work that I do. for me, it's been that thing at a personal level of being able to discover my own narrative in life,
Yeah.
write my scripts, live in a way that feels true to me, that then leaves me with that sense of when I take my last breath,
Mm.
I will feel like this was a life well lived.
Hmm.
I really followed through with the things that were most important to me and with the people that were most important to me.
Hmm.
I
Beautiful.
believe I think that's the number one regret of the dying. I think Bronnie Ware wrote that wonderful book. You know, the number
Hmm.
one regret. I wish I'd lived the life that I'd wanted for myself, not the life other people wanted for me. Something
Mm.
along those lines. I paraphrase.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the power of relationships when you get to that deathbed where people look back and reflect on how relationships have been the most important thing all along, right? And
Yeah.
even from the psychology side, I'm always holding how our sense of self is created in relationships. Of course, there is the self, but
Hmm.
it's a self in relation. And so just how large relationships are in our world, and often one of the things that we don't get any education on formally, right? One of the most
Hmm.
crucial pieces to our mental health, our well-being, our pleasure, and yet nothing. And particularly men suffering so deeply in this, like you mentioned, the suicide rates, right?
Hmm.
Because isolation, and we know even in the research from childhood how and infancy, how crucial it is to be connected, and like
Yeah.
infants that are left alone will die,
Yeah.
and that doesn't change as we get older, right? Is we're social beings needing relationships, but
Mm.
men particularly have this, like you mentioned, the patriarchal influence of independence, and that's what it means to be a man. And then
Yeah.
yeah, when you add something like sexual abuse, sexual violence on top of that, I mean, now we're really in a zone that you cannot talk about. And yet the numbers of occurrences, and obviously I'm biased because I'm a therapist, so I hear a lot of it myself, right? But it happens so often, and yet it's such a difficult conversation for most men to start.
Huge. Huge. I'm not sure if it's still the most up-to-date figure, but the last thing I saw was that 1 in 6 men has experienced some kind of sexual abuse or transgression in their lives. 1 in 6. And it's yet, as you say, so rarely talked about, so rarely touched on.
Hmm.
And of course, it is, again, the majority of it is from other men. It's
Right.
other men that are in that world of transgressive behavior. But I love also what you're touching on there. I just recently finished the training with Gabor Mate in compassionate
Oh,
inquiry,
great.
and I love how Gabor talks about this thing that our wounds are relational wounds, and it's only through relationships that we get to heal them.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing. To even get to the point then in working with men around how do we open ourselves up to even be in a relationship in the first place? How do we find the wherewithal to discover intimacy and authenticity when we meet each other? And I think that's really the thing for me around this idea of the trauma of patriarchy is that, it's I'm not saying anything new here, but it's really crystallized for me around all of the messages that boys get to pull yourself together, pull your
Yeah.
socks. Boys, don't cry. Don't be a pussy. That one's a really kind of knife edge one. Like the worst thing
Hmm.
for a boy is to be compared to a
Right.
woman in any way. Every time that shame is used as a tool against us to shame us, we learn to cut off from our feelings. We learn to dissociate from our felt emotional bodies. We become less connected to our connection to empathy. So what happens is that we become less whole, less human. That's the big thing for me in writing the book. It's been this thing of the journey to reclaim our whole humanity and what that looks like and how difficult it is and how much effort it takes.
Hmm.
Beginning that, engaging with that, then just naturally through doing that opens ourselves up to the intimacy that we might be needing and wanting from others.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just thinking about the difficulty of that first time of opening up to talk about it, right? So many people are holding this. When I think about that journey of opening up to more and more vulnerability, authenticity, pleasure, it starts with taking that leap of someone that's safe enough to trust. And I think it begins that journey of truly expanding into presence, right? Over different relationships that help you expand into that. Sometimes it's a therapeutic relationship, sometimes it's a friend, but often that first time of opening up to be vulnerable is so scary, so terrifying, particularly because of what you mentioned. What does it mean if this person sees me cry? If they know this has happened to me, will they still respect me? Will I still be loved? And that's the relational paradox right there of being that we are social creatures, we need to stay in connection. And so if there's a potential threat to that, if I
Mhm.
disclose if I cry here, my wife might leave me. I mean,
Yeah.
so the weight of all of that is so heavy. I'm curious, how did you first take that leap into the vulnerability, into the
Mm.
authentic?
Mm. Thank you. I think for me it started in my 20s when I woke up one day with a certain numbness
Mm,
in my body, a certain sense of I was floating a little through the world.
sure.
And some recognition somewhere in my mind, this idea came in that, oh, this is where it's really easy to hurt myself. This is where I could really do myself some damage without, because there was so little feeling, not because I was so depressed and so anxious and so kind of lost in that, the churn of big feelings. It was like the absolute opposite of that.
Yeah,
Was just a recognition of the numbness, the dissociation that I was feeling. I didn't have the language for it back then,
sure.
but it was like a really interesting inner impulse of, oh, I need help. There was something inside me, and I think we all have it, this kind of natural, innate, I'd say it's biological, evolutionary even movement towards becoming whole, becoming healing, becoming whole, becoming the version of ourselves we're meant to be. That led me to find a therapist, and that led me to find someone who I remember going to see a psychoanalyst without really knowing anything about it.
Oh no.
Who pretty much in a classic way sat behind me, said
Wow.
nothing for the
Oh
whole hour. I
God.
left practically shaking with the activation and
I
knew that
don't,
wasn't the right way.
yeah, I
Found
don't
someone
do
who was
that.
much
I don't do
more,
that.
right? Right. Like that's so clear. You're so engaged. You're so engaging with me as a human being.
Hmm.
That's what I needed to find was a therapist, which was someone, again, I didn't really understand the terms, who was humanistic in
Yep.
training, centered, and just like someone I felt like comfortable enough with to talk to and talk to for a long time before I really started to feel safe enough to open up.
Yeah.
But already I had that in me that, there is a point to this. I just have to trust that just by showing up each week, something over time will start to unlock itself.
Hmm. Yeah, when you were speaking, it was reminding me of the work I've done in psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, where we often talk about the inner healing metaphor and the ways that, we invite people when they're going into the psychedelic experience to trust their inner healing to come forward and to bring up what needs to
Mhm.
be processed in the session. And
Mhm.
sometimes we talk about that inner healing as the same way that a plant, you put it outside and it will naturally turn towards the sun. Or thinking about a scar, right? The ways that if you have a cut on your hand, it will naturally form that. And thinking of our psyche
Mhm.
in the same way, if we have these
Mhm.
pain points and our body, soul's mind is trying to bring it forward, right? And so
Mhm.
speaking to that. And yeah, for me, I hear the ways in which the numbness, so many people are in that space, still even having sex in that space with such
Yeah.
numbness, right? And I think about the pleasure that is possible on the other side with full embodiment. Oh, like what? That's such a
Mhm.
journey. And I want to help so many people get to that space. But getting there often is a messy, painful, when you start to really tune into the body again, there's often a lot of pain that hasn't been acknowledged.
Hugely so. And the compassion that we need to have for ourselves to be able to see that pain and hold it and make sense of it.
Yeah.
I love how you brought pleasure back into
Yeah.
here as well, because that was a really significant part for me.
Mm,
I had parents, one, on the one side, my father was not good with boundaries, with his own sexuality. He was atheist as well. My mother on the other side was highly religious,
mm,
and I found myself caught in that kind of very classic Catholic with a little C place of, oh, I'm somehow broken, and that God is somehow out there and
mm.
can see me, can see through me, can hear all of my thoughts.
Yeah.
Pleasure was the place through conscious kink and tantra where for the first time I found the most exquisite, extraordinary pleasure in my own body. I'd had this like almost a moment of epiphany. It's like if my
Mm.
body can give me this much pleasure, how can it possibly be wrong? And that was that, first sense of, oh, maybe that divinity that I thought was out there is actually in here inside me.
Mm-hmm.
That was like a really transformative moment.
Mm-hmm.
And also when you talk about psychedelics, that was actually what drew me to do this work. It was a really beautiful moment for me, like never having done drugs for most of
Mm-hmm.
my life, afraid of drugs, knowing that if I went there, if I found something that would take the pain away, I'd be fucked. Can I say
Mm-hmm.
that?
Yeah, you can cuss.
I'd be fucked.
No rules.
Um, and having this experience through psychedelics of being able to take a step back, and I hear this is quite common for a lot of people, but to be able to see all of the points in my life and to connect all of those dots together and to recognize from that my purpose, what it is that if I've been on this journey of my own healing, that I'm at a point now I can support other people on their journeys. So
Mhm.
that thing of psychedelics has been really transformational in
Oh
so
yeah.
many ways. I'm
Yeah.
curious, did you have a moment like that yourself? Did you have a moment
Mm,
where you tried something and it just like changed the way you see the world?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can think of a lot of different moments. I'm thinking about my first time exploring kink and
Mm.
yeah, what it meant to be in bondage and having just these like ecstatic
Mhm.
orgasms of screaming and just so much release of my shame in that. And oh, it was so powerful. Or even one of my most recent psychedelic experiences, I think it was a group experience where my intention was to really think about the journey that I've gone on for myself with my own experiences with violence and purity culture and doing the work that I do to now be in this space. And that was my intention. And there was this song that I put into the group playlist, which is the Sacral Root Chakra song from Beautiful Chorus. Do you know Beautiful Chorus?
Um,
Highly recommend. You know, just these
okay.
beautiful like sound bowls and humming voices and and it was just
Mm.
such a beautiful moment to like have that song come on during it was a ketamine experience in a group and it was so like I felt this overwhelm of similar to yours of like seeing your own journey and just the journey I've gone
Mhm.
on to reconnect with pleasure for myself kind of laid out before me and I was just crying
Oh,
tears of joy to be where I'm at now not where I was in the past right to be here now and to feel such clear alignment of what I want to do in the world of helping people get to this level of pleasure and liberation in their own bodies and for me it was just oh I'm still simmering in that space and it brings me so much joy to have these more tender conversations because I know what kind of pleasure is possible and I know how many people are suffering. I see it in my office, I see it in my communities, and it like there's
mm.
so much weight to that. I have a
Yes.
long career ahead of me, as you do too, of like supporting people to get to that sort of liberation or even my first time having like breath orgasms with psychedelics in my own space, that was a really radical experience where I have the joy of living in my own studio apartment, and it took that level of set and setting to be alone with myself, naked with my body on a psychedelic, and to sit in it and say, why am I still scared? Why is there still tension in my body? No one is around me. I am safe right here. Why is that? And that level of opening up and that sort of psychedelic space, oh my God, that changed my life. Whew.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I
Yeah.
resonate with that a lot. And I love that thing you were saying about that I recognize around the importance of presence, the importance of coming into the present moment, coming into devoid of any imaginings or thoughts about the past or the future, or what sensation is there right now? What does that feel like? And just getting rid of all of that other chatter,
Yeah.
beliefs, the self-limiting beliefs that we've had about ourselves, or the worries about the future going forward. It all disappears when we can learn how to breathe and be present and feel. It's beautiful.
We're just often so holding so much, you know?
Yeah.
I think sometimes people don't, myself included, we don't realize our shoulders are up here and we're moving through the world in this state, or we're
Hmm.
holding tension in our body somewhere. And
Yeah.
the amount of time it takes, or even for me, the years
Mm.
it has taken to get to my current level of embodiment. Super stoked for where I'm going to be in a couple of years. You know, like those orgasms are going to hit even
Woo.
harder. But that's taken so long to even realize. I remember like I would my toes would always be crunched.
Hmm.
And it would take partners who would realize, be like, "Hey, Nicole, your like toes are clenched." And I was like, "Oh, I had no idea." You know, like, I had no idea for years. I was just holding, right? And so
Hmm.
many of us are functioning in the world, not knowing how much tension is actually running through our bodies.
Right. So true. I've long been of the belief that the secret to the best sex we'll ever have is safety.
Yes.
Safety with each other, safety with ourselves. And I mean that differently from the kind of safety, and like air quotes, the safety that we get in long-term relationships, which can so easily shift into a different thing where we lose a sense of really seeing each other.
Yeah.
When we can really see each other, when we're really emotionally in tune, when you have a partner that's saying, yeah, I can see your toes are clenched, who's kind of present enough to ask you about that and hold you in the answer, like
Hmm.
to be able to create that kind of safe container for ourselves and for each other is huge.
Yeah. Yeah. I just did a training on combining the worlds of psychedelic therapy and sex therapy. And when we think about psychedelics, it's so very clear we talk about the set and setting, right? The setting being, you know, where are you at? Are you feeling safe with the people around you? And particularly in the therapeutic work we do with, you know, specifically ketamine is what's legal right now. I've had clients who have done hundreds of ketamine experiences in their
Mhm.
lifetime, lots of different parties, lots of different Burning Man, you know, the whole thing. And then they'll sit in a therapeutic office where the, you know, the setting is so much more calm.
Mhm.
Say, oh my God, these people will say this, that was the most radical experience at a low dose. I felt so much more than I've ever felt in other
Mhm.
settings. Sex being very similar, right? You can have an orgasm somewhere, but when you have it with someone where you actually feel safe, present, held, it's radical.
It really is. And there's something to add to that, if I
Yeah.
may, which
Yes,
is
please.
think of how important it is to be witnessed
Yes.
in that. Like that goes back to the that first transformative experience I had with Conscious King,
Sure.
where it wasn't just the pleasure that I was feeling, but it was noticing and seeing in the person who I'd only just met like an
Mm,
hour before a level of holding and awareness and attunement to me that felt about as close to love as I'd ever experienced. and that sense of like the total acceptance of who I was in that moment, which kind of goes back to that thing you touched on earlier. It's that as kids we know from infants, we know when our parents and our caregivers aren't fully attuned to us.
Yeah.
That's the wonderful experiment. You can probably remember the name of it. I can never remember the name, but it's one where an infant faces a TV monitor, and on the monitor
Mm,
is the mother in real time engaging with the infant, and there's lots of cooing and gurgling and laughter, and it's beautiful. And then the researchers flip the switch, and it goes from a live recording to a recorded
mm,
loop of the mother doing exactly the same thing, engaging at one level with the baby, and the baby knows instantly that this isn't real. And I think it's fascinating how later in life it's still possible to create these experiences where we can reclaim, in a way, that sense of being genuinely, fully, wholly seen and accepted without judgment for who we are.
hmm.
I think that's where psychedelics can help us open up,
Sure.
and where your role as a therapist, or if I'm working with people, that to be able to really be there with them, that's that's also magic in its own way.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like I studied 5 years of therapy to learn that being with
Hmm.
someone is the most powerful part, right?
Yeah.
That psychoanalyst that put you behind the chair, you're doing more powerful work than that, let me tell you. When you are with someone rather than putting them behind a chair, man. But yeah, the research shows how important that is from childhood, right? The baby
Hmm.
and in that video and just that noticing moment of it being off. I've seen other research where, yeah, they have the baby and the mom will just stop cooing and
Yeah.
stop and give a flat face, aka also psychoanalytic theory, where they're like, you should be the tabula rasa flat face and let your client project onto you. Like, it's like clowns. That's why clowns are scary, right? That's why clowns are scary. But yeah, the baby starts to cry, continues to try and get the attention of the mom, and then starts to panic and again goes through very similar dysregulation. And I think what breaks my heart is, and I know you mentioned this in your work when you wrote that the people who like really like cry into your arms of never having experienced this level of presence when they work with you, right?
Mm, mm,
Depending on your caregivers, your community, your parents, the level of attunement that you experienced in childhood sets you up for expectations for the rest of your relational life. And we can absolutely change that. Let's be clear, I believe in change. But the reality is, so many people, if you had a parent that wasn't attuned to you, you learn
yeah.
to expect that as the norm of what love is. And then you
Yes.
can go through the rest of your life expecting this level of crumbs. And then you get such presence
Hmm.
where you're just so shook. This is often also where sexual and erotic feelings come up in therapeutic relationships and therapy, where someone's never had someone who's so fully present with them to say, hello, I see you. And it makes sense that that's erotic, right? That's one of the most powerful things is to be seen like that. But so many people have never had that before.
Hmm.
Oof, you get a touch of that, a taste of that, like you did from that person who was doing kink with you, who I remember
Hmm.
one of my past guests talking about their, they described their journey of saying, they met someone who was kinky and the divine cosmicness of that angel, right? Of just what that meant
Beautiful.
for their life. It changed
Beautiful.
everything, right? To meet someone that present who said, I see you.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that's hot.
Really hot. I was just noticing as you were speaking, I had like a real flush of kind of tearful energy come up for me,
Yeah.
because it's, going back to this thing of it's an ongoing journey around how to really feel everything again, how to really kind of embody our full humanity. That it was just a feeling around the experience I'm having currently with my anchor partner.
Mm.
We're 3 years, 3.5 years into a relationship, and it's only now in my early 50s that I'm discovering the depths of intimacy that are possible. Depths that I didn't know, I didn't know existed. And it's only through staying with each other and doing that thing of, supporting each other and healing from our respective traumas, which are always so perfectly complementary, right?
Oh yeah, it
It's
always
like
is, isn't it?
it just, yeah, it brings up so much for me around we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
And it's just like trusting that when we can feel safe with someone, we can go to these new places. We can allow ourselves to surrender. It's that thing where the safety translates into the calming of our nervous system. And it's like from that place that we can see new things and experience new things. We kind of let go of
Mhm.
all the tension that you were referring to earlier.
Yeah. I just had a conversation like that last night with one of my partners, and I feel like one of the important things I try to practice in those conversations is curiosity.
Mhm.
I'm noticing this dynamic, this pattern. Can we get curious about it together?
Can we see each other like beyond who's here in this moment?
Mm,
If the activation we might experience today or the triggering we might experience today is somehow linked back to some part of our distant past, can we hold that younger version of ourselves at the same time and be like, oh yeah, I see you.
yeah.
This is as much to do with what happened in the past as what's happened in the moment, or actually maybe more so.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then holding the reality that everything we do is for a reason, right? There's reasons why we do things. And one of the biggest reasons being to keep us safe,
Mhm.
right? And so I might be pushing you out saying whatever slew of words because that's how I've kept myself safe in the past. I might be avoidant and pulling back because that's what has kept me safe in the past. You know, if you've been kicked before, you're going to bite back, right? And so I think holding that sort of dynamic with partners too, of understanding that yeah, it's so much easier when you can tune into that image of them as their younger inner child and what it means to have compassion for that. That often feels easier and sometimes something that can be helpful to tune into in these relationships when you see someone coming at you is like, okay, they're trying to stay safe. Where is this coming from? Let's get curious together.
Yeah, I sometimes find myself just holding on to the image with my partner of the two of us as 5-year-olds, like
Mm,
together in a sandpit.
just holding hands.
It's like being safe enough and playful and just yeah, it can be really beautiful, but it's also surprisingly difficult to have that same level of compassion for ourselves,
Oh,
for our
yeah.
younger parts. And to be able to see ourselves,
Hmm.
see our own hurt through someone else's eyes is such an important part of the process.
Yeah. And like you said, we don't know it until we do, you know? So you think, I'm doing great, I'm doing my best. And then someone says,
Hmm.
well, I mean, you're kind of doing this. And then depending on how defensive we are, we might, no, I'm not, you know? And then you realize when you look back, you're like, oh no, it was all there all along, you know? But now,
Oh
now
no.
you're here, you know? And so that I think that's always my point too, where I'm like, what do I not see right now? What am I doing
Mhm.
now that I don't even recognize? And keeping a
Mhm.
large dose of humility in that journey as you keep going, you know? I'm curious too, in your journey with kink, the things that have been spicy for you, have they changed over the years?
Things that have been spicy.
Yeah,
Oh, interesting. Yes and no. Yes
right.
and
Of
no.
course. Yeah.
Because when I think back to it, the range of things I experienced in a really short period of time were really significant, actually.
Right.
Like there was all kinds of things from rope to pegging to
Sure.
wrestling to a fire ritual, which was also a huge thing for me. It included
Mm-hmm.
scarification, which wasn't something I was particularly drawn to, but felt important as a ritual at a certain point in my journey. So, like, when I look back, it's like, wow, I did a lot of serious shit in a
Mm-hmm.
very short period of time. At one level, it feels like I'm not pushing the boundaries or limits around those sorts of more spicy things as much as I did back then. But on another level, I've also discovered this thing of a kind of a sexual empathy
Mm,
where other people's turn on becomes my turn on.
sure.
And so it's less about being discovering more spicy things than I used to, but just a broader range of things.
Yeah.
Things that I didn't imagine I would be drawn to or didn't really understand. But then through discovering someone else's turn on, I just felt that, whoa, come on, like,
Sure.
oh, I get it now. Oh, I get it. I want to do more.
Sure. For sure.
So I've really enjoyed that part of the kind of more expanded. So I guess my experience is more breadth than depth. Um,
Sure. Yeah.
I just try everything.
Right. I'm hearing out of that too, the connection. I imagine as you continue to go into deeper and deeper presence, the more we can be with other people's experience, right? And so the beauty of that. And again, it also is reminding me of psychedelics again too, where people start to do psychedelics and they're like, I want to do all of it. I want to do the high dose. Let's keep going the high dose. What about even higher? Where's the ego death, versus like, oh wow, like what if I actually take a smaller dose and really feel my surroundings, whether it's a relationship or nature, all of this and the depth to that, right? There's a lot of similarities, I think, between kink and psychedelics, these expanded states of consciousness, whether it's created through
Mhm.
the flogging or through the drug, right? But the neurochemicals, as well as the opening up of intimacy and vulnerability that we feel. I mean, I feel so many parallels. So, yeah, to
Mhm.
hear that your practice has deepened in this way of being able to feel the turn on of other people and maybe ways that weren't as accessible when it was more that edging of I want the more, the more, and the more.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, you've nailed it. It's the intensity of the connection. And I see that in a lot of think play anyway. It's like the spicier it gets. Another way of looking at it is the spicier it gets, the greater the attunement that needs to be between two people, the more
sure.
presence that's required, because the risk profile just like goes up massively, right? But it doesn't need to be that way either. It's like if the awareness of the connection is there, it's like that's what the intensity is about. That's where the pleasure comes into play. That's where all the
Mm-hmm.
delicious, juicy stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the spiciest thing that I do is more around age play. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I think of myself as a daddy. I think a lot of clients come to me without necessarily having the vocabulary around it. But and I mean this initially from a non-sexual perspective, just being able to be present with someone with that caregiving, nurturing, loving
Mm-hmm.
acceptance. We were touching on this, I guess, just a few minutes ago about how to just hold someone in that kind of unconditional love.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm really aware of how edgy that can be for a lot of people. That whole kind of where some people don't fully appreciate the clarity of age play being a way of playing, which is really clearly consensual role play between adults who know exactly what they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
allowing ourselves to discover parts of ourselves that may have been exiled or lost along the way. I think it's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I think people forget the large piece of, like you mentioned, the consensual adults
Yes.
doing this. That's step
Mhm.
one.
Mhm.
And under that paradigm, play, right? And then the level of intimacy you need to be able to feel comfortable with someone to even explore those parts of yourself, right? If that's something that's calling to you, there's so much vulnerability there for people to experience that. And then I think about even the ways that often gender dynamics put us into something very similar that most people don't even consciously know they're playing with, of the like, oh, he's the man, he's gonna hold me and keep me together and I can just like fall apart in his arms. It's very similar when you think about it. Like, but that's like just the normal trope of romance in our like patriarchal world. That power dynamic, I think, I've definitely been there in my past, so it's very similar in a lot of different ways.
Yes. And it's interesting that you say that because my experience, at least in the work that I'm doing, has been kind of the opposite. It's
Mm,
where women will come to spend time with me and are expecting to receive a certain kind of sexual service. Yeah, they'll spend 3 hours crying in my arms, being like, I didn't know it was possible to feel so safe in a man's
yeah.
arms or in a man's presence. And it's like, wow, that blows my mind that actually there is so little safety that we experience on a day-to-day basis. Back to safety. Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think about the historical context of it wasn't until 1993, so it's been 31, 32 years that marital rape was outlawed in all 50 states. Prior to that, a man could rape his wife legally because she was property. And so that's just 32 years ago, let alone the history of the rest of it all. And so,
That's not.
yes, as a society, we are absolutely healing from the ripples of that violence. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, for a woman to feel safe and seen, of course, that's going to bring her to tears. That's not often what we experience on the streets, which is why I love being
Hmm.
in a dungeon and being like, look at me now. I'll take the stage
Hmm.
here. Don't do it to me on the streets, right? Like, there's so many other ways that we are now healing from
Yeah.
that violence collectively. And I think some people say, oh, I haven't experienced capital T trauma.
Yes.
I think we've all experienced that trauma
Hmm.
collectively. It's in our collective consciousness, it's in the ways we move about through the world.
Hmm. And how trauma can even be in the way we were talking about it earlier, how trauma can even be the things that should have happened but didn't, like the kind of care we should have received but didn't when we were youngsters and infants. There's something interesting for me here too around the way men engage with our sexual energy,
Hmm.
like in terms of that, like being out in the world and in the
Sure.
public
Yeah.
sphere especially. But this thing where when we become dissociated from our kind of embodied feeling selves and some kind of sexual energy arises, we don't really feel it. We don't like know how to make sense of it. It just becomes like an urge, an inner urge.
Hmm.
I like using this the two metaphors of fishing and fire. And there's this thing that often one does with fishing, this idea of like casting out the line and like throwing something out there in hopes of getting a catch.
Mm.
Catch is somehow something that's going to help fill that loneliness that we were talking about earlier. Except that every time there's that throw, we lose a little part of ourselves with that as well. It's
Mm.
like a constant throwing. And then there's the metaphor of fire, which I often see as well, that kind of the way of men being, I've done this too in my own way, absolutely. The kind of like a flamethrower. It's like where that sexual energy kind of like a big wide arc
Mm.
destroys anything in front of its
Sure.
path with that kind of objectifying look, gaze,
Yeah.
the undressing of someone, the having sexual fantasies about someone. And I'm really taken by this idea of a different kind of metaphor of a lantern. Like,
Mm.
can we learn how to generate our own sexual energy and hold it in a way where, like a lantern, it's like fully felt and fully expressed, but also safe, that there's a boundary around that, which allows others to come towards it, to be able to enjoy the light and the warmth and the heat and not be burnt by it, where like we can all of us be autonomous sexual human beings, not needing to
Hmm.
suppress that sexuality, but be able to respectfully hold it for ourselves and in relation with others.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because we don't want to suppress. That's where we see the problems,
Mhm.
right? Particularly religions that do lots of repression. We see what happens when you repress this aspect of the human condition, right? So being able to find that way, like you're saying, to have it exist in your being because eroticism is our life force, right? It is our creativity. It is the way that we engage with sensation. Even if you don't engage in sex, eroticism is a life force. How you engage in sensation, pleasure, play, that is something we
Hmm.
all have. And so being able
Hmm.
to embody that and have that in a way that's, yeah, harnessing it for yourself and not inflicting it upon other people is an absolutely crucial part of ending rape culture. This is where I get
Yeah.
excited about ending rape culture through the liberation of our pleasure. It's not through the suppression, it is through the liberation.
Hmm. So agree.
Right? Yes. Yes. And how do we do that though? I think it's being present as much as we're being present with each other right now, as much as you're being present with your clients, as much as we can be present with our people that we love in our community of sexual, platonic, romantic, all of them. When we're
Mhm.
present with that person, that stranger, whoever it is that touch of connection that you don't,
Yeah.
maybe they've never had that level of presence before, and you have no idea what level of ripples that is going to create to actually end rape culture, which is part of the suppression and these desires to control the power over. Again, I believe in the
Yeah.
power of presence.
Yeah. I've heard you touch on that in previous podcasts, which I'm
Mm,
also totally with that idea of being in a place of power with, not power over. I think so many men see the project of feminism as somehow wanting to flip the tables, and that feminism's about emasculating us and making us less powerful. And it's just not what it's about. It's about liberating all of us.
yeah. Have you read The Joy of Sex? It's like a classic, right?
I think I thumbed through it many times when I was like
The new joy.
pubescent teenager.
Yeah, the new joy of sex. It was funny because my training site knows that I specialize in sex and relationships, and they had some old sex books. They're like, ah, Nicole, you might want these. And so I said, ah, okay. I threw some of them away because they're so old, as you can imagine. If we look back on the lineage of this, there's a lot of patriarchal problematic views in all of them, so I threw most of them away. But this was one of the like classics, so I said, okay, I'll hold on to it, and I was flipping through it, and it had this discussion of women, and it said in the sidebars like women bold, and then below, and it said he cannot be a good lover until he views women as a people, b equal. And I was just so hit by the, oh yeah, we still have the a part. People,
Hmm.
women are people. This was something we had to write in a
Hmm.
book. We had to write that in a book. What? Oh God, just holding that of like, God, like this is so deep of what it means to not just be objects, to not just be property, right? And
Yeah.
to find peoplehood. Fuck,
Hmm.
Jesus, wow.
Hmm.
Let alone equality.
Radical.
I was just like dumbfounded reading that the other day. I was like, oh God, this is why we have so much work to do.
It
So, oh
really
my
is.
God.
And that was a book that was probably published around the same time as Women Are from Venus, Men Are from Mars. And just like,
1970s.
yeah, trying to emphasize the point of how essentially different we are, and just not recognizing the extent to which that socialization is what impacts us and makes us who we are.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And it's fascinating to read the research. I've been reading Untrue by Wednesday Martin, all about women's eroticism. And I'm sure
mm,
just the familiar trope that men are cheaters. They're the ones that want the novelty and the desire of multiple people. And research shows that's not true. Women
mhm,
cheat at just as much once they've gotten liberation. Once we
mhm.
had access to finances, we started
Yeah.
cheating just as much as men. Once it was no longer if you do this, you could die and no longer have the ability to live, women started cheating left and right. And so it's just really interesting these tropes we have about men being the people that want this sexual desire, but women
Mhm,
equally want it, if not
mhm,
some of the research suggests more in terms of
mhm.
diversity, which is there's so much to unpack here. Let's just say everything you learned about sex was wrong. Let's just throw that out there, I think.
That's a pretty good title for a book. You need to write that one.
Everything you thought, wrong. Start again.
All of it. All of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. I'm curious. I know I asked what you would say to your younger self, but is there anything that you'd want to say to men more specifically? Big questions, right? Again, the book is there, but what do you want to say to
Mm,
men who are listening to this
mm,
podcast?
thank you. That's a good one. I think it's one of the chapters I've been writing. Patriarchy hurts you, man. I think that's like the being able to recognize, because it's, there's that classic metaphor of fish in the sea, not
Mm,
knowing what water is, because it's all around them, right?
right.
And I think that's what happens for a lot of us men, is because we live in a patriarchal culture, because we hold power over others, and you don't really appreciate that until you don't have that power. I think that's a really key thing men don't get. The moment you don't have it, you can see the power dynamics at play. But it's like when we're surrounded by patriarchy, when it's just part of our day to day, it's really hard to appreciate the extent to which it does limit us, the extent to which it really confines our ability to be ourselves, to live our truth, to live our best lives. I think that's what I would really want men to just question more than anything, just to get a little bit critical about the lives that we're living and why we're living them and where those
Hmm.
messages came from that said we had to be breadwinners and we had to be protectors and we had to be the ones that are always in a place of knowing and yeah, just getting curious,
Yeah.
recognizing, where is the hurt for us? And where does that originate from? What
Hmm.
little steps might we be able to take to change that?
Right. Yeah. There's no end to that process, right? When we look at the various systems of oppression that impact us, if you think that you've unpacked it all,
Hmm. Well,
oh no, we got to start at square one again. You know what I mean? Where
uh,
it's like there is going to be a never ending process of unpacking this for various forms of oppression, patriarchy, racism, sexism. Like we could list the whole, it's a constant reflection of curiosity.
yeah, and they're all interlinked. You
Yes,
can't
they
separate them
are.
out. Just cannot separate them out. The more I look into one area, the more other parts of that come into play. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. And I think about the power dynamics of not knowing until you lost it and the amount of women who, you leave your friend's house at night and you say, "Okay, I'm going to go home. I'll text you when I make it safe," right? And the
Mhm.
amount of text messages that me and my women friends send, "Oh, I've made it home safely." I'll ask a man, they're like, "Why do you do that?" It's like oh yeah, you don't understand that through this world I constantly live with this
Yeah.
and you don't know that. And if you could just walk a day in a woman's shoes, you would feel it
Mhm.
instantly in ways that you don't even
Mhm.
know.
Mhm. That flamethrower energy again. It's like,
Right.
feel it. It's palpable.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. And so I think too about the ways with men where I feel like there's not enough conversation. If there is conversation about sex, it's the, oh, I fucked her and then her and this bitch, like that sort of like trophy kill count of what you've done, or literally no conversation about sex at all. And so, if men could just start talking to each other about what they're experiencing.
That's the thing, though. So many men, in my experience, when I think back to my friends and my kind of social circle, so many of us were really wanting that level of conversation. We just didn't know how to start it.
Hmm.
There's always that fear, whoever might start it might be the one fearing being excluded from the group, just like being back at school and in the playground. It's
Yeah.
like, do I dare to show a vulnerability here? Do I dare express to a friend that I'm having difficulties in my relationship, emotionally or sexually, whatever it might be. It's that first daring, which is where we start to see, oh, vulnerability is a form of courage. Vulnerability is a form of strength. Like just rewriting that whole narrative of what is strength anyway. It's not what we've been raised to think of it as. And
Mm-hmm.
sure, it could be that there are people that won't respond well to that,
Right.
but there will be just as many people that will feel thankful and grateful for the opening that that presents to be able to share of themselves as well, to make that personal connection where just a little bit of that loneliness gets eroded away and we can
Mm-hmm.
feel like we're with someone in a meaningful way.
Yeah. Check your friend group, right? If your
Hmm.
friend group doesn't feel safe talking about these things, you're right. There is another friend group where you can. And again,
Hmm.
I just immediately feel the level of pleasure that you could feel in your body. Because at the end
Hmm.
of the day, too, what is essential to pleasure is sure, embodiment, sure, safety, but also communication skills. And
Yeah.
if you have gone your whole life being nonverbal about your sexuality because you have just been letting it happen, unfolds naturally. I'm putting that in air quotes. Oh my
Mhm.
God, you are missing out on such a world of pleasure, my friend. And I think anyone in kink knows that. Like the worlds you can build through open communication about your desires, that is a muscle. That is a
Mhm.
muscle that even, when I first started and I was with this beautiful kinky human who asked me, how do you like to be touched? I went freeze state, silent. And I said, I don't know. And what a journey it has been on where now I could give you the monologue. I could give you the handbook and be like,
Mhm.
this, that, this, right? And so, for all the men out there too who don't even know how to communicate their pleasure and their desires, that
Yeah.
happens sure through lovers, but also through community. Oh, how
Yeah.
did you learn this? Oh, that was, oh, okay, okay. And of
Yeah.
course, that's also how we talk about sexual trauma too, is learning that maybe this wasn't okay. I learned that through conversation, but the whole arc too, all the way to pleasure of what are your fantasies? How are you communicating this? How are you making that happen? That also exists in community conversation. And so the silence that we're experiencing is so in the way of accessing deeper pleasure. Uh,
Yeah. I love that. I love that sense of communication being the key. And there's something in there around the vulnerability of not having the right words and being okay with that. Like even just in the time we've spent chatting together, the number of times I've like, oh, I'm losing my words. Like,
yeah,
where were we? What am I saying? How do I say them? It's
sure.
okay. Like being able to just be open about, yeah, sometimes I struggle. Sometimes I
Hmm.
struggle to find the right words to convey the meaning that I might have. Like the more open we can be with each other and in community, the more leeway we give each other to get things wrong, the more we can see each other as just human beings who are
Right,
doing their best, trying to
right.
get by.
Right. And that means dismantling the idea of that manhood, humanhood, any of it, right? That I have to have this all put together. I have to know exactly what I'm going to say and be here versus coming to someone saying, okay, I don't have all the answers here. I'm personally confused. I want to let you in on some of the thoughts that are going through my head right now. Is how do you feel about that? Right. And then the intimacy that can come from that space of the unknown of, I don't have it all put together. I don't have a clear conversation plan or agenda here. I'm in the gray space. I'm in the mess. But there's so much vulnerability and connection that can be created through
Yeah.
that. And I think about, in the field of psychology, they talk about that emotion wheel. Have you seen that?
Mm. Tell me. Tell
Yeah,
me
for
more.
sure. Where
Like,
it's like at the center, maybe some of the more core emotions. I don't know. I question words like core. Where do we draw that line? But some of the more sad, happy, joyful, and then they spread it out
right,
into more
right.
finer
Yeah.
expressed words in the circle. And I think about sexuality the same way. I want
Mhm.
pleasure, I want pain, I want excitement, I want, whatever. And then how do we stretch that out to get more words? And again, we think about this in the field of psychology. If you're right, like the more words you can have, you can name your experience, communicate it with your partners, and have connection. Sex being the same way. So many of us have no language because it is the cultural taboo. It is the thing you don't talk
Yeah,
about. And so
yeah.
most of us don't even have language to describe this. And we need that damn emotion wheel of sex, where it's like, yeah, I want this and that and this and that. And then getting even comfortable using it. Oh, that's a
Yes.
journey.
But the emotion wheel, not the emoji. It's like
Yeah.
you and me.
Wow. Yeah, we are
That's right.
regressing in some ways.
I love how that relates to like the way I make sense of that, the sense of how often in our lives we live within a really thin, small bandwidth. And there's something that happens when we say, right, I'm not going to live by the rules I've been given anymore. I'm going to, through communication, through inquiry, start to take apart our understandings of things and put them back together. But when we can start to feel more in every way, to feel more of the pleasure as well as more of the pain, to feel more of
Right.
the sadness as well as the joy, to feel just more of everything, like that's really living. That's really being alive. Knowing
Hmm.
that we won't be stuck in any of it for any period of time because that's the nature of being alive. Like life is a
Yeah.
pulsation. It's like
Right.
everything comes and goes just like the breath. And that we'll just shift from feeling one thing to feeling something else before we
Hmm.
know it. But
Yeah.
to have the full bandwidth to own
Hmm.
all of what it is to be a human, that really excites me.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've said this before and I love it. It's like I cry hard and I come hard.
Love that.
Right? Like
God,
those are
sometimes
not.
all at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Man, those are good spaces. Those are good orgasms.
Those are the good ones.
Yeah, and it's so connected. And I know you see that, and I see that. It's about the embodiment, it's about the safety, it's about the full range. You're right. You can't just stay in the light all day long. You have to understand that there's dark in the human experience, there is loss, there is mourning, there is death, there is grieving, and you will not escape that, my friend. Any of us.
Any of us. Mm. I love how
Yeah.
we explored the light and the dark as well, just in the
Mhm.
last hour or two.
Yeah. It's important.
Joy, the laughter, the sadness, the shadow, the difficult things.
Hmm.
It's all here and it's all available to us.
Yeah.
Choose to go there.
Yeah. Absolutely. Another question I have for you is I love these big questions. I think they're so fun, and just like, what is the biggest thing you have learned thus far in your work? I know.
Biggest thing I've learned in my work that I am enough.
Yeah, say more.
I am enough. I think that's a really big part of being able to support other people and their healing. For me, was just that recognition of I don't need to have the answers. I don't need to be able to be clever in any way, to be able to point them in the right direction, to be able to say exactly the right thing at the right moment that will blow their minds and somehow
Yeah.
transform because of something I did. I just keep learning to trust that if I just show up and am with someone, stuff happens, magic happens, energy moves, and I don't have to do anything. But just by being me, I am enough.
Hmm. Yeah.
For a lifetime of growing up, feeling I wasn't man enough, rich enough,
Mm,
strong enough, powerful enough, with a big enough dick, or whatever the
sure.
enoughness might be, that's been huge.
Yeah.
I am enough.
Yeah. I mean, I'm I'm feeling that as a therapist, right? Like, what does it mean? There's so many times where I'll hear like the world's atrocities, and you think, what are the right words to say here? How am I supposed to show up for this person that is expressing to me some of their deepest pain points and sobbing in your office? And I'm with them, right? There's that Winnie the Pooh, you know?
Yeah,
There's this classic story about Eeyore being so sad, and his friends, Pooh and all of them asking, like, oh, what do you need? What do you need? And Eeyore says to just be with me. And somehow that makes it all okay.
it's not just ER, it's what we all need. It's so common, though, to have our feelings minimized, especially as children, to be told that we're being too much. I
Yeah.
mean, no, but being too emotional, or being too happy or joyful, or too sad, or making too much of a fuss. We never get to just feel what we need to feel and allow the natural arc of that feeling to work its way through us.
Yeah.
Just be simply held in now.
And I think for myself and most of us, that means examining our own comfort with these spaces, right? Because so many of us are in a space of wanting to help other people. And so the second that they start to cry, we say, oh no, it's going to be okay. Don't worry. No worry. Like, you're going to be fine. It's okay, right? That coming from our own space of discomfort with the emotions that are coming out, as well as a desire to caretake, missing the whole
Mhm.
point, though, of what it means to actually be with that person. I see you. This is tough. You're right. And I am with you right here, and you're not alone in that. That will make the person cry more, which is maybe what's needed at the point, but it takes our own comfort to get comfortable with that, because I've struggled with that so much in the therapy office, where I like see that person, I'm like, okay, what skills do I have? What tools do I have? Okay, like it's like this panic state where I have to, oh, you're
Yeah.
right. This world is so hard, and I can be with you in that.
Mm.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, so all of us included, lifelong journey, right? When you see that person in your community struggling, what does it mean to take that deep breath, breathe into that, and say, I'm with you, and see how that impacts the relationship, rather than particularly men, let's name that, right? Men, particularly
Mhm.
often wanting to be like, here's the solution, I've got this, I'm the
Mhm.
provider, I've got the clear plan. That's a lot of what you hear in relationships, particularly between men and women, of the man not being comfortable with the emotions and trying to just like, here's how you go, rather than like, oh, I see you. That makes sense. Oh,
Yeah, you've nailed it. It's that thing again of having been taught how to not feel when we're younger. It's just huge discomfort for us. It has been, it continues to be for me in so many ways to just sit with someone else's upset, especially if it might in any way be directed at me, like
sure.
coming back to relationships. But how different the world would be if we could just be with each other.
I dream of that world. I
Mhm.
do. I
Mhm.
do. Mm. Well, it's been such a joy to have you on the show. I want to take a deep breath with you as we come towards the end of our time.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
just check in to see if there's anything else that you want to share with the listeners. Otherwise, I have a closing question I can ask you.
I don't have anything for the listeners, more just an appreciation,
Mm,
yeah, for this time,
mm,
the way that you've been with me as people who didn't know each other before hitting the Zoom button,
mm-hmm.
being able to be with each other. It's felt really a really great example of that.
Mm.
Appreciating you for that, Nicole.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And thank you for being vulnerable. It takes two to dance, right?
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm learning to get more comfortable with compliments. So I'll take that
No,
one into my heart again. I always do that. I'm like, and
you
you
could, you
too.
think so you.
Damn it. Damn it. So taking a deep breath to feel that. Thank you. It's a joy to be in this space, and it's a joy to keep learning of what it means to be present, to not have an agenda as the host here, to not have a plan of where I'm going to take us, and to
Yeah.
be comfortable with, okay, we are two raw, authentic human beings in this space, and let's be intimate and talk about some of these more complex things in our world. And yeah, it's created some of the most beautiful conversations that have absolutely changed my life, let alone the listeners who write and tell me about it. I mean, I'm really thankful to be here and I'm really excited to continue this journey.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. You had a last question.
Yes, I do. All right.
Shoot.
So, the last question I ask everyone on the podcast is, what is one thing that you wish other people knew was more normal?
Mm, I think feeling afraid. I think if we recognized more of the fear that we all of us carry around inside of us, we might treat each other differently.
Yeah.
If we were curious with that as to where that fear might come from, originate from, yeah, that could change a lot of things.
Hmm. Yeah. I'm thinking about all of the hatred, the violence that happens out of fear of the other. I think about evolutionary theory of the other and the scariness of that, the unknowns, the ways that we project onto other people from our past experiences. We put people into boxes and presume that we know their world. And a lot of what
Yeah.
we talked about earlier of seeing that inner child,
Hmm.
I would love for people to meditate and think just for a moment to see that human before you that maybe you're judging or presuming, to see them as a little baby
Mm.
in the arms of another and see what sort of feelings that brings up for you, to remember that that was once someone's beautiful little baby being rocked back and forth. And oof, the weight of that, when you really think of that, you're right. I think there's so much that would be different in the world. That's an understatement, right?
It goes back to what you said earlier about the ways in which we protect ourselves.
Yep.
And what is it that we're protecting ourselves from? And especially when, I don't know why this is coming up for me around whether it's substance addiction or behavioral addiction or attachment styles, that the ways that we find to help us get by in life, that help us get through life, are all part of that process of a sense of needing to protect ourselves from something. So underneath that is a fear, and what's that fear about?
Mm-hmm.
Get curious,
Yeah.
not to be judgmental of others, but just curious for their an understanding of their humanity and our own humanity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Have you seen the research on Rat Park?
No.
Oh God, I love this research. It's so good. Um, yeah, and a lot of my studies on drugs and chaotic use and addiction, there was, a lot of our research on that was based on a study where they would put rats in cages with cocaine and heroin, right? And
Mm.
the rat would drink the cocaine water, the heroin water to excess and overdose and die. And then people came in more in the 70s and said, what if we rewrote this experiment? And instead of leaving the rat in a cage all by himself, we actually created a rat park where there was things for the rat to do, a whole world of connection of other rats. And I bet you can see where this is going. The rats barely touched the water. And if they did, it was never to a point of overdose. And so,
Mm.
what does it mean to rewrite our whole fucking understanding of addiction, to get
Yeah.
really clear on what is the cage that we are living in our personal lives, as well as the larger systems and the relationships that we are lacking in? Whenever I hear of use, I immediately think, what is the societal context going on for this person and where are their relationships?
Yeah.
Oof. So much to rewrite for a whole society on that one. Whew.
So much. And ultimately, it comes back to the origin of our wounds being relational and how the
Hmm.
healing of those wounds only happen through relationship. So it's not, it's the kind of coming back to really meeting each other and seeing each other as human beings and, yeah, questioning how we've got to where we've got to what we each might need to do to change that. Mm.
Well, thank you for taking a big step in that today, for being vulnerable.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a
Yeah.
joy and a delight talking with you this
Mm-hmm.
time.
Yeah. For all the listeners who have been connecting with you and your work, where can they find your book? Where can they connect with you?
Mm.
Yeah.
So I'm Bear Phillips online, bearphillips.co.uk, Bear Phillips 2 on Facebook and Instagram. The book is still in its early stages. I'm approaching publishers. I have a GoFundMe campaign, but there is a page on the website dedicated to the book. Come have a look.
Great. It's such a joy to have you on the podcast today. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, then leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. And head on over to modernanarchypodcast.com to get resources and learn more about all the things we talked about on today's episode. I want to thank you for tuning in, and I will see you all next week.